Boy is on trial for his murder and is set to begin on April 3rd, 2023. It's been a long 3 years since this happened back in January of 2020. You may or may not have heard of Gannon Stauch and Letecia Stauch, and you may have not followed the case, but are maybe now curious about it as it picks up some attention. Or you've followed the case but need a little refresher. Today, I'm going to do a quick video to catch you up to speed on what the case is all about. In the coming days, you'll see even more videos. I do have a playlist of 70 already. However, they were created day by day at the time as the case unfolded. Notable, some of the past videos that I did predicted the behavior of Letecia, which was interesting, and also pointed out the discrepancies. These upcoming videos will give you a streamlined view, and you can see the details to prep you for the upcoming trial. So now, let's get into it. On January 27, 2020, 11-year-old Gannon Stauch went missing from his Colorado Springs home. His disappearance quickly gained national attention as law enforcement agencies and volunteers searched for the boy for several weeks. But what happened to Gannon on that fateful day? And why did his stepmother's story keep changing? Gannon's case has captured the attention of the media and people from all over the world, including the community here at It's a Crime for the last 3 years. We call him our little buddy. A lot of people call him G-Man. This story, this case, left so many people wondering about the events leading up to his disappearance and his eventual tragic and horrific death, murder. Gannon was a bright and kind and outgoing 11-year-old boy who loved telling jokes, playing on his Nintendo Switch. He loved Sonic the Hedgehog and couldn't wait for the upcoming movie to come out. He loved his family. I was told he would even offer to shovel the neighbors' snow. Gannon was a great kid with a full life ahead of him until it was taken away. Let's take a closer look at what we know so far. It was a Monday, January 27th. Gannon was last seen at his home in Colorado Springs. He was seen on a neighbor's security cam that morning stepping into his dad's truck in the driveway. Gannon's dad, Al Stauch, however, was out of town for training as he was with the National Guard and was in the care of his stepmother. You may be wondering where his mom Landon was in all this. She lived out of state and they had joint custody. She also previously had a high-risk pregnancy. In the neighbor's security cam footage, it was concerning to the world who saw it and the neighbor himself. You can see Gannon slowly walk to the truck as if something was wrong, as if he was in pain. The neighbor confirmed that. Gannon opens the truck door and something falls out, and you can see him pause and stare at it for moments, like one would if they, let's say, had back pain or stomach pain, and the thought of picking something up felt like the greatest feat in the world. Gannon stayed home from school that day. Letecia advised the school and even lied to her new employer why she couldn't be in to work that day. She lied, saying that her stepdad was killed after he was hit by a car and she wouldn't be able to go to work. But what happened the night before was deeply disturbing, and we don't quite know what took place, only that there was a story about a candle and burning the carpet, and Gannon supposedly burned that carpet. A video was recorded by Letecia and it was released, and it was horrific. She was reprimanding Gannon, and he was heard crying, and she thought this would vindicate herself, in my opinion, but it showed abusive behavior. Now, it is important to note, Letecia said there was smoke and burns in the carpet from a tipped-over candle, yet the detectives said when they were searching the house that it was quite a pleasant smell in the basement, not a burn smell, according to the affidavit. And you and I know when something burns, it can take a while for that smell to go. People who followed this case were even testing to see when candles tipped over if it would burn, but that was myth busted. The candle wax doesn't catch on fire, neither did the carpet. Earlier that day, Gannon and his little sister, Letecia, and her teenage daughter, Harley, went on a hike in Colorado Springs called Garden of the Gods. That was the same day Kobe Bryant died. Remember that? And Letecia was, according to her, crushed by it. For the past few days, though, and leading up to this day, Letecia had been quite bitter and she was Googling all sorts of things. She was unhappy in her marriage, she was unhappy with the children and having to watch them, and she was resentful of all of them, including Gannon's mom, Landon. Her most notable Google search, in my opinion, was "One day some people will wish they treated you differently." Now, on that January 27th, Letecia headed to a pet store with Gannon in tow, north of where they lived, at the edge of town, despite the fact that there were several other pet stores nearby. Letecia notably left her phone at home, and by the time she arrived home back that afternoon, Gannon was nowhere to be seen. Now, note, this has been a hot topic of conversation because on video, you can't see Gannon go into the house, and the neighbor couldn't see Gannon go into the house. Yet the affidavit notes that he had to have come back home. Investigators say that Gannon was murdered shortly after 2 p.m. That's when Letecia arrived back home, and Gannon's bedroom proved something horrific happened there, as his room showed evidence of the presence of blood. Gannon's bed was moved also from its original location. Now, investigators also detail that Letecia cleaned up that crime scene and sent her teenage daughter Harley to go grab supplies. His stepmother Letecia reported him missing later that day, claiming that he had gone to a friend's house and had not returned. In fact, Letecia said he ran away from home. And just before 7 p.m. that evening was the call that was made to the authorities. And since he was, classified as a runaway, no Amber Alert was issued, among other things. But Letecia couldn't identify the friend that Gannon was supposedly gone to visit, or which house or houses she visited to ask about the whereabouts of Gannon. She couldn't detail anything. So authorities came, but not until 10 p.m. that night, and they did a little search around the house. Little did they know, Gannon was said to be in the trunk of Letecia's vehicle, according to the affidavit. Blood evidence was found there and under was found there and under the vehicle in the garage. Here's an interesting stat taken directly from that affidavit. It stated that data collected by the FBI and reported in the Journal of Forensic Sciences say over 71% of homicide cases that involve false reporting, that the reporting party is responsible for the murder. As investigators look into her claims, they found inconsistencies in her story. Gannon's family and friends immediately launched a search effort with volunteers from the community and law enforcement agencies working tirelessly to find the missing boy. Everyone except for Letecia. However, as the days passed, the search became increasingly desperate. Notable, Letecia was said to say, "Search, search, search, where am I gonna search?" Now, Gannon's mom, Landon, said to the public, she said, "My son is a very loving kid. He wouldn't want harm on anybody at all, and it's so hard to just think, why is this happening to him? I have no clue. My kid deserves to come home. My kid has a purpose. My kid has a life and is important to me and is important to everybody that is standing in this room. Please have hope with me." The investigators searched in town in Colorado Springs, and evidence led them to Palmer Lake, north of Colorado Springs. Letecia had even admitted going north, although she made up a story that she was looking for a bike for Valentine's Day for her husband, Al. Now, note, something spooky actually happened while I was covering this case. I called out Letecia, and from my analysis said that she was a distancer, she'd go the distance, and to look north of the city. And sure enough, a couple days later, the authorities were looking in that area north of the city. That actually spooked me for weeks. A few days into the investigation, Letecia does an interview on camera, and it may just be worse than Chris Watts. She has her back turned to the camera, which was straight up bizarre, and Letecia gets her teenage daughter at the time to respond to questions and affirm her as well. I did a video on that and analyzed it. Things turned out to be true on that. I'll have that here or in the description box below. Now, the most important line is where she said she wanted an apology once they find Gannon, and that she wanted an apology from her husband, Al, Gannon's father. Now, her story was not adding up to the authorities pretty quickly. Letecia showed up to an interview with law enforcement 2 hours late and with a freshly washed car. You see, she rented a vehicle, actually 3 in total, even though she had 2 vehicles at home, 3 if you count her teenage daughter's vehicle. But she rented one, gave a little story to the authorities and Al, and according to the affidavit, Letecia used the vehicles to transport Gannon over and over until he ended up in a suitcase being found over a bridge in Florida. Evidence showed that Letecia was near that bridge as well. DNA evidence of Gannon was found in Letecia's vehicle, among other places. But that's not all. Letecia created a story to the authorities and 4 different scenarios of what happened to Gannon, and also stories to her husband, Al. And she was a witness to all of them. More on that in a moment. During the interview with the authorities, Letecia claimed she was held at gunpoint, she was essayed by a Hispanic male named Eduardo with a G, and Gannon was abducted by the male after he finished assaulting her. But notable was Letecia said while he was doing it to her, Gannon's sister came home from school and Letecia went and greeted her at the door and told her to go play on her bike, not call 911 or nothing like that. She closed the door and then went for, more down in Gannon's room. Now, okay, Letecia, you can't really essay the willing. Then the story changed to Gannon jumped on the guy's back and threw Gannon across the room, held him at gunpoint, and demanded a suitcase and a cardboard box. Notable, that's the suitcase that was found under the bridge in Florida, and no signs of fictitious Eduardo. Also, Gannon was shot in the jaw and stabbed 18 times, and he had fractures to his skull. Also notable, at one point, she included a story about the guy also assaulting Gannon. Letecia was offered an essay kit, and she refused to do one. Oh, and Letecia also claims she cleaned up the area, gave more stories of Gannon having a bleeding nose and blisters that bleed. Detectives then seized Letecia's phone while she was in that interview with the authorities and applied for a warrant to take DNA samples. Her car was seized as well. Now, the end of the interview with the authorities, Letecia sticks tissues down her pants. She then claims that she has chest pain and a shortness of breath. She claimed her rights were being violated and that she wasn't offered food or drink. And just in case you're perplexed about the tissues, she didn't want authorities to take her DNA from the Kleenex, hence she put them down her pants. Letecia was then transported to the hospital, and she was said to be unresponsive on the ride there, but miraculously, according to the affidavit, she was okay when she got to the hospital. She left with an unknown person, didn't stay, and didn't wait to get her essay kit done. Now, within 24 hours of Gannon reported missing, Letecia made claims to law enforcement that she was being set up, and without any promptings, she texted the authorities and said, "What do you want from me? Because I have nothing. One of your very own leaked to me what you guys were doing. I did nothing or am being set up. I'm not really even sure, other than being told that by another blue with El Paso. I was told I couldn't go home to sleep, and on top of that, men were sent to a home with a minor female, and she was forced to stay there, not to even have good." This is Letecia's text, hard to read. "Every conversation that's said, even at this moment," she says, "I can hear inside. What do you want from me?" The detective responds and says, "Come in to talk to me. I would just like information to find Gannon." Now, Letecia told her husband, Al, that there was Eduardo, but there is also another guy named Quincy, and blamed him as well. You can't even make this stuff up. She told Al in a phone call that there were 4 stories. Number 1, there was an abductor in the house. When El Paso County Sheriffs came to the house on January 27th, the abductor was still in the house, and she tried to tell deputies that someone was there. The deputies checked the entirety of the house, and no additional person was located. The second was she was essayed by Quincy now. She said she was essayed by him at her home, and he abducted Gannon. She said that she knew his identity because she saw a paper with his ID card fall out of his pocket. I guess it's handy to know who it was. Letecia sent a photo of Quincy to Al. Number 3 was that she was actually followed by Quincy from Petco. And at some point, he was laying in the middle of the road in front of her. When she stopped, not to run him over, he jumped in the car and made her take him home, where she said that he essayed her. Now, Quincy was listed on El Paso County's most wanted list on February 10th. Letecia sent that photo to Al, and authorities figure that that's where she got that idea from. Number 4 was that she was driving just out of town, and Letecia and Gannon were near this country line road in Highway 105 as seen on the map. Gannon was riding a bicycle in the area, fell, hit his head. Remember, he was shot in the jaw and had skull fracture, and was then abducted by Quincy. Quincy was driven by a man named Terrence. Letecia tells investigators that searches in that area would be futile. Notable, they found a bloody sock of Gannon's that Letecia said it just flew out of the back of the truck, and they also found a particle board that had blood on it that had Gannon's DNA on it. And that was said to have been transported to that Palmer Lake area. You could see in the investigation that investigators were sifting through snow for any signs of Gannon. Now, police believe that Letecia fabricated this story after seeing Quincy's picture in this lineup of Pike Peak's most wanted fugitives. It's interesting.
Aktif burst fragrance, makin aktif, makin wangi. Wash roll on, hijab chick. Brushnya on, aktifnya on.
Of Gannon. Now, police believe that Letecia fabricated this story after seeing Quincy's picture in this lineup of Pike Peak's most wanted fugitives. It's interesting. Within the first few days of Gannon's disappearance, Letecia changed her story, said she was a victim of SA, felony menacing with a weapon, and assault resulting in abduction by her SA abuser. She provided a new location of Gannon's disappearance over 30 miles away, several different circumstances that she said she was an eyewitness for, and unprompted explanations for why Gannon's blood would be found by investigators in key locations. You tell me how'd she know that information if she wasn't involved? Let me know your thoughts below. Now, according to the affidavit, Letecia moved Gannon's body several times. She lied to the authorities. She lied to the family. She lied in her interview. People in the community were putting blue lights on their porch for Gannon to come home. Letecia wanted pink to put up in support for her. She made up several conflicting stories and went to great lengths to hide the truth. Because of Letecia's inconsistencies and a recorded phone call between her and her husband Al, who was working with law enforcement, Al soon learned that she lied about Gannon and what happened. Letecia was no longer welcomed in the home, and she left with her daughter Harley. They left the state and headed east. Letecia was arrested on March 2nd, 2020 in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, just over a month after Gannon went missing, and she was arrested on suspicion of murder. For the last 5 weeks during that investigation, the authorities had gathered evidence of a crime committed in Gannon's room, enough blood for him to not be able to survive. The public only knew he was missing, not that he was presumed dead. However, on March 18th, 2020, 2 weeks after the arrest, and almost 2 months after Gannon went missing and was murdered, he was found 1,400 miles away from Colorado in Pace, Florida. Now, something very sick happened, and I witnessed it at the time. Letecia, on her Facebook profile, posted a video of Gannon and his little sister on vacation. Gannon was waving at the camera and turned around and jumped in the water. Now, this video was posted in the beginning of February, around the time Letecia was in Florida, and according to the affidavit, allegedly dumped his body over a bridge a few miles away from the hotel she stayed in. Her cell phone also pinged in that area of the bridge. And just like the video, Gannon was gone and was found over a bridge. How evil can you be? I will never, ever forget that, and it still chokes me up to this day. And think about this. At this time, she leaves the state. Gannon hasn't been located. He's still missing. It's only been a week, and yet she's leaving. She's not welcomed at the house. Things aren't adding up. She hasn't participated in searches. Yet now on this day, she posts a sentimental profile video on Facebook, him waving goodbye and jumping in the water. Now, soon after she was arrested, Letecia headed with deputies back to Colorado, but not without some drama. She assaulted a deputy en route and had to spend the night in a Kansas jail. Then she continued on back to Colorado. She also wrote letters to the judge, which is interesting, and I've read that out in previous videos. You can check that out in my playlist. In them, she claimed her rights were violated. She was definitely innocent. She found God, and she was receiving threats to her peanut butter. Check out my videos more in depth of the ridiculousness. She also didn't feel like showing up to court several times until finally judge said something. She tried to escape the jail with a broomstick. She wanted to represent herself. She claimed that the defense was in cahoots with others. And the latest in the news, it wasn't pertaining to this case, but an inmate died in the jail she was in due to an overdose. And apparently, it's unknown how Letecia was involved, but Letecia was said to put some sort of bag on the table for someone else to pick up. And the authorities didn't think it was too much of a big deal because the inmates seemed to not be too concerned, is what they said, about the bag. What are your thoughts on this? Have you heard of this story? And do you think if Letecia was involved that it was something devious? If so, comment devious in the comments below. I'd love to see your thoughts on it. Now, Letecia claimed her innocence over and over and over, and then changed her plea to not guilty by reason of insanity, which brings me to my next topic. Letecia had 3 competency evaluations. And the first 2, she was deemed competent. And that was back in January of 2021, which was only a year after that Gannon died, and when that second one was completed. Now, the third one and the latest evaluation just arrived, and it was way past due from when the court wanted it to be submitted. It was said that Letecia was in psychosis when the murder occurred. And the prosecution said about the timeliness of it, he says, "This is a disrespect to court deadlines. I've never seen anything like this," and the judge agreed. The woman conducting the evaluation, her name is Dr. Lewis. She's a former clinical professor of psychiatry at Yale University, the author of several books on the topic of the insanity plea, and the subject of the documentary called Crazy, Not Insane. The documentary outlines Lewis's work with notorious killers such as Ted Bundy and many others. Dr. Lewis is expected to testify at some point during the trial. The judge said that he wanted the report, though, by Monday the 20th, and before it was a February deadline, and he ordered the defense that this is not a request or hope, that it's a deadline. And according to what I'm reading in the news, it was still delivered a day late on the 21st, and I find this is BS. Also, there was an MRI that was expected to be done, but in the 13 months, it hadn't, and so it's going to be very interesting to see what comes in the trial. We are on the countdown. I have full faith, though, in District Attorney Michael Allen. He has some pretty amazing credentials and track record. Letecia is going down, in my opinion. What's yours? Let me know below. And it's interesting, isn't it, that Letecia is now deemed that she had psychosis, yet in the last 3 years, she wasn't. Oh, sure, she's pulled some stunts. I've seen her, but it was laughable. She was flicking the lights on and off at the courtroom before she entered. She spun around in circles going, oh, I've mentioned this in my other videos. She was faking it, in my opinion, not that she had a mental issue. She just had a manipulative plan. Letecia's pattern is manipulation over and over. And Letecia has a criminal history long before 2020, which includes domestic violence, simple assault, a false bomb report, and communicating threats. Sound familiar? Now, the evidence is said to be presented on April 3rd for trial. They've already been going through jury selection that started March 20th. There's been disrespect by Letecia throughout this entire case. Every time she had a hearing, and even through the investigation, it was always something with her, and always something about Letecia and her rights being violated. What about Gannon's rights? This has devastated the family. I don't even think one could even find a word to describe this. Gannon's mom has been very vocal the last few years about Gannon and his memory. She's been very strong throughout this nightmare, and she's had to travel back and forth and watch this monster, in my opinion, work the system and manipulate and lie her way through it, as she always does. And this new information about psychosis is ridiculous to me, in my opinion. Again, I can't wait to see how this differs from the past 2 experts and the past 3 years. And I can't wait to see how Michael Allen rips this apart. But perhaps because of the disrespect to timelines in the courts by the defense and this expert, that the doctor's testimony will be stricken. It's hard enough to go through the death of a child and then add to that your innocent boy was murdered, and then add to that this alleged killer was someone that is supposed to be trusted. She is not insane, in my opinion, but cruel and a monster, and her history shows that. I believe she wanted to punish Al, Landon, and everyone around her, because in her words, one day everyone will wish they treated her differently. And what better way than to take away the son that bears her husband's name and reminds her of Al. She didn't have a moment of psychosis. This was a lead up. And this was Letecia's pattern. Abuse the night before the killing and the day of. And chitter chatter says long before that. She was calculated. She knew she'd be caught. So she tried to set up the defense from the moment Eduardo showed up. She traveled 1,400 miles with a little boy who's been dead and decaying, then transported in the back of her rental van with her teenage daughter in tow. And he was found wrapped in the very blanket of his bed in a fetal position. The evidence leads to Letecia, and only Letecia. She thought she had the last laugh by posting that heart-wrenching video of Gannon waving goodbye and jumping in that water. But she's not going to be the one to smile last. We are. Justice is coming. Please leave blue hearts for our little buddy Gannon below. We're going to see this the whole way through. Bye-bye, Letecia. And you're about to have more threats in prison than your peanut butter, as you complained about in the past. We'll see you in the next video. Please leave a comment below. Show your support. Give a like. If you want more videos on this, I've got a lot coming this week. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you soon.